Hi everybody and welcome again to Unfiltered Business. If you're new to the channel, my name is Josh. This is Unfiltered Business. We often talk about the media being the fourth estate, a pillar of democracy to keep the government in check. Is that just a romantic abstraction? So in my discussion with Sharaad Kuttan, we unpack the reality of political pressures across different administrations and more importantly, the corporate constraints. We always think of media being pressured by just politicians, but are there other players involved? So I'll be discussing this and so much more with Sharaad Kuttan, so let's get straight into the conversation.
So this is one of the things that I think is leading to an erosion of trust in media houses because of alignments of certain media houses like this towards a particular issue or a matter. Now, I think it is fine for people to share, or for media houses to share their point of view, to share their opinion, but they need to also objectively report what is happening. So is that taking place? Is the objective reporting taking place together with their own comments and feedbacks and opinions, or is it just an aligning towards a particular angle of a story?
You know, I think the way, if you remember the newspapers of the old days, it would be, you have the front page and then you have all these pages, and then you have your op-ed pages, right?
Sure.
So the op-ed pages are where you platform points of view, right? And they might be varied, they might be politically aligned. And, you know, there is no embarrassment to being politically aligned in sort of mature democracies because that's accepted. You want to read that kind of view, go to that media. If you want to hear other opinions from different point in the political spectrum, you go to that media. That's fine, okay. Right? But the idea was that in the first 20 pages, the news reporting reflected a sense of objectivity around events that were happening, right? And you got every point of view, you're balanced and such in the reporting. Now, those are the principles.
Okay.
The actually doing it and delivering on balance is a day-to-day struggle. And some of it has to do with very practical issues, right? It's not putting together a panel for a conference, you have 6 months lead time. It's not like that. And so people say to me, oh, how come you didn't, there was no gender balance or there was no ethnic balance or whatever. I said, the problem is if you have to produce something on a daily basis, it really is about who can come on the show. And if, you can't get everybody to reflect all the different views and identities of the country, then do you not run the story? And so there are practical issues around question of objectivity, which, and balance is part of that, right? Balance in terms of voices, getting both sides of the story.
I just think that there needs to be a media house that does an amalgamation of these few things, which is to report as it is, but also do share your POV, bring in someone that's got a different point of view, bring in a activist or bring in an NGO person that has got, which is fine. I think right now, like what you said about the BBC, and not just BBC, I think a lot of other media houses, you have people lobbying for a particular kind of news to be reported, a particular kind of angle to be covered. Trust is, eroding, which now gives birth to a lot of alternative media, which now we're wondering whether can they be trusted, because they are just tired and fed up of reading structured, doctored news for it to fit a particular shape.
So the way I think of trust, I think, it has to do often with your personal belief systems and whether a media organization and services it provides aligns with that, right? There are very few people who I think don't begin from that point of view. So in which case, people were saying, well, I'm going to read actually several newspapers with different points of view and let me check, on triangulate, the different opinions and come up with my own ideas. Often and this was the criticism, in the past of what is called incestuous amplification, right? The idea that you live in or operate in a world where you only hear opinions that conform to your sense of what is lived reality or what the realities out there are. And you don't want to deal with uncomfortable points of view. You don't want to deal with alternatives, right? And so I think that was always there in the mix. Trust. You might have trusted the New Straits Times and not trusted Haraka, for instance, or something like that. In the Malaysian context, that might have been the situation. But at the end of the day, the trust issue has evolved precisely because people have access to alternatives, right? And so you might trust Joe Rogan as a podcaster. You might trust, Keluar Sekejap as a podcaster in Malaysia. And do they provide balance? Do they do this whole thing as we were talking about just now? Where there's objective reporting on the one hand, and then there's a specific and very clearly marked out space for opinion. But that doesn't happen. In fact, today, everything is opinion, right?
Yeah,
right.
Think so?
Yeah. I mean, so much of it is about opinion. I mean, today I'm opinionating on, or giving my opinion. I don't create new words, but I think the idea is so trust in an abstract sense maybe was there before when there were more controls. There was less diversity, and today there's less trust, partly because of the failures of those mainstream media voices, right? Yeah, because they didn't reflect all that was going on.
Correct.
I used to read as a young person the newsletters coming out of Consumer Association of Penang, another alternative media. Remember, they had a newsletter, and Sahabat Alam Malaysia. If I wanted to get to know what was happening with our environment in, say, Sarawak and such, or anywhere in the country, I would read those old because they were available. It's just that they were a minority and they didn't have the distribution channels, or they were restricted, but they were there. It wasn't impossible. You had to do a lot of work. A lot of people don't want to do the hard work of triangulating and getting different sources. Right. But, that was my thing. And that's why I became a journalist.
But, you mentioned about these podcasts like Joe Rogan and Keluar Sekejap. I don't think, or this is my point of view, I don't think a podcast can be a platform for objective information to be derived from. I still think that there needs to be a media house for that, because they go through all the fact checking, they go through all the verification before it is put out. So if I go back in time, right, the whole scandal that took place in the Democratic National Committee, 1970s, the Watergate scandal, right?
You couldn't have been born.
No.
Okay. So you just read history. Okay, that's fine.
When that was exposed, it was done by the Washington Post, right? We did not have anything in Malaysia until, I guess, 1MDB, or at least I want to think so. Any expose in that way. So when we read that, we believe, this is true, because it's coming from a credible news house who would have gone through their multi-layered fact-checking and verification. So I know that this is true. Now, I will go to a podcast to see what is that guy's POV on this. What is this guy's thought on this whole matter? But to say that I'm going to watch a Keluar Sekejap or a Rafizi's podcast or Joe Rogan to know this is truth, I don't think I'm going to be doing that. It is just having a chat with someone and seeing their POV. I still rely on, or at least I used to rely on media houses to give me objective, accurate reporting. Now, maybe that's not the case.
Well, the thing is, it's not just points of view or opinion, because embedded in that opinion are facts, right? You form a consensus about what something is happening, and you frame it in particular ways, but that consensus ultimately rests on shared agreements about facts.
Yes.
Right? And so that's where the objectivity comes in. It's already embedded in the opinion giving. It's not sort of separated out.
Yeah.
But I think, I just want to say, there were a lot of scandals before 1MDB.
I'm sure.
MBF. I mean, you could just
never had a voice. Yeah, MBF.
No, well,
correct.
actually, this is it, right? So maybe I hate to say this because it makes me sound old and makes you sound unnecessarily young, as if that was a crime, and it's not a crime to be young. Well, there was a history, and groups like Aliran, would surface and expose these scandals. Sahabat Alam and Consumer Association of Penang would also, surface these things. It wasn't that there wasn't information out there that was critical of what was happening in the country. So, and Actually, to be honest, there were a lot of mainstream media that also would take up issues. If they weren't directly political, it didn't mess with the owners', vested interests or commercial interests, they could go to town with some of these scandals because, it was good for them. People picked up the newspaper, people subscribed. So it's not like it was all or nothing.
Right.
When it came to covering.
Correct. I don't think there was ever a nothing. Maybe there were shadows of this information flying around in the news media, but we never really got the full picture.
Before we carry on with this very critical conversation, I want to give a very special shout out to the sponsor for this episode, Chester's. Whether you're looking to upgrade your workspace or elevating your living room, Chester's brings world-class luxury furniture right here into Malaysia. Now, you would have seen other premium furnitures around, but I had the opportunity of visiting Chester's myself and seeing what they do differently from the rest of them. Why don't you come with me as I go and visit Chester's Collection at Bangsar? I've seen the luxury furniture outlet Chester's Collection along Jalan Maruf, but only after I walked into the store, I had realized that Chester's Collection doesn't just design luxury furnitures. Their entire line of furnitures is engineered not just for a comfortable or luxurious feel, but for spine protection, for proper neck alignment, and circulation for your legs. So, how can Chester's help with your posture? A seat where you can adjust the seat depth actually protects circulation and reduces pressure. Adjustable armrest that is able to go up and down maintains spinal and upper body health. And good lumbar support maintains the natural and healthy curve of your lower spine. Healthy work, healthy productivity, healthy furnitures. At Chester's Collection, they've got your back.
But do you think today, 2026, there is still political pressure coming from Putrajaya towards news media houses?
I mean, let me put it this way. In my limited experience in the media, it actually, not since 2018 has there been a lot of pressure. There is sometimes a sense that, and this is where it doesn't have to work directly, right? All you need to know is that, well, where's your bread? Which side of your slice of bread is, the butter on? And if you have, I don't know, commercial engagements with government. So do you want to jeopardize that? In fact, this would be true of the private sector as well, because the private sector can boycott you.
Oh, yeah.
They can cancel you. They can punish you, by taking out ads and such, right? And so if, say, for instance, you want to cover developers, right, or a particular developer, right, then the question is, wow, do they have a commercial interest with you? How do they, and can they kill it by saying to your editor, hey, we'll put ads in, in whatever show or newspaper, but that means you're gonna have to taper down on something else, right? So then becomes a real trade-off issue for the editor, and so the big players, commercial players in this country, do they exert pressure on media? The developers, they property development is huge in this country, and they might not want to talk about deforestation. They might not want to talk about all the problems associated in that industry. Not that any of them are necessarily implicated in all these problems, but there you have it. So it's not just government. I am not obsessed with censorship from government. I think this is
other players.
Yeah, and in fact, I don't even think censorship is the biggest problem. Okay, which is kind of weird to say because a lot of journalists talk about this and all that. But, I think sometimes even with the freedom, the question is, what are you doing with it? Are you telling the best stories? Are you telling it the way it's interesting and engaging people? And a lot of times people don't even test the limits of their own freedom. So to kind of whinge about government control without yourself really pushing the line and doing the work, and we might want to come to what work is in this context. But, I think it's kind of rich. And so I get like a bit tired of these conversations about censorship because I think sometimes we're missing the fact that that's not really the problem.
So I think you raised a very good point. And I also believe that the censorship doesn't necessarily have to come from government. There are also other players, big players involved in this. But the other thing that you also raised actually segues to my next point, which is what are we doing with the freedom that we have, right? So just now I shared about how the Watergate scandal happened, and you know about this. Then you have the Me
I was alive, but I was very young.
Yeah, but I'm sure you know what happened. And then, like issues like the Me Too movement, and right now we have the Jeffrey Epstein case. All of which, there is a genesis. And most of it, I see the media involved. I mean, somebody in the media decided to investigate and then inform, right? And I don't have to go to the US. If I even just come to Southeast Asia, I look at India. I look at their anchors that they have, like Barkha Dutt and Arnab Goswami, Rajiv Desai. They don't just cover critical or dramatic issues. They also cover current issues such as like the elections is going to take place or the elections that is taking place. And I think one of them even won an award for how they covered the election. We don't have those kind of fearless, or at least I think, we don't have those kind of fearless anchors that...
You wouldn't count me as one of them?
So fearless anchors, now I'm put in the spot. Fearless anchors
God, rubbish your guest. Go ahead.
that actually does this kind of reporting without fear or fervor. And is it because of some sort of self-censorship that they are doing? Because they are concerned that somebody is going to come, not necessarily the government, somebody is going to come after their back. And it doesn't have to be in crackdown, yeah? It could also be in defamation, in suits, legal suits. So is there self-censorship fears in that sense?
Well, I mean, okay, first let's deal with India. I don't know enough about India, but of course, there you have a much more kind of vibrant democracy, at least in terms of these institutions, right? And, but we also know that, over the last decade or more, especially under the prime ministership of Narendra Modi, that there's been a consolidation of control over the media, right? So, but we don't have to go into that. And that has provided problems for Indian media to be vociferous or energetic in its criticisms and such, or they've had to play along, and they play along to the agenda set by the Prime Minister's office, and so you have to talk this up or you have to frame it in certain ways, But they've always been very interesting, and a whole range of media, because India is huge and India has the population to support a whole range of media. So even if a minority, like a 1% of India is already 100 million or something like that, right? So you have a market. And this is what people forget about the media. The media might be the fourth estate, but it's also about different commercial entities, and they depend on the market. Most media is run by advertising. Advertisers represent the interests of commerce, and so commercial interests. So you can, and in the past I've done things where I did a food review, and unfortunately the sushi chain that I had made some sort of bizarre comment about baby octopus and sushi. Anyway, so it was like taken down, and
what was taken down?
My review, because it was upsetting to the owner, who happened to own a chain of sushi restaurants. So not stepping on the toes of people who fund you and give you your paycheck it's been a reality for a long time. So if you so the idealized version of, say, the American media, that's and it's the heroics of the Watergate scandal and all these kinds of things, that's propaganda. That's American propaganda, right? So the realities on the ground, the American journalists have had to deal with a whole range of pressures on them, and some of them commercial, some from government, and sometimes, and this is more to the problems here in this part of the world, and I think in India as well, is that the public can be a threat to the media.
The public.
The public,
How?
right, of course. Because different organizations within the public, in your public, in the public sphere, might take exception to your coverage. They might say, oh, you're insulting my community.
Yes.
Yeah,
That
right?
has happened before.
Yes, of course it has happened. And so the media has to deal with pressures on them from all kinds of stakeholders. The question is whether they are seen as a stakeholder and therefore say, actually the media has to deal with the fact that there are communities and their sensitivities are legitimate.
Yep.
And so you have to now justify why you have done X, Y, and Z in terms of coverage or whatever expose, right?
Yeah.
And so these are not, so the principles are one thing, the lived reality is another. The fact that today we would consider the public a legitimate stakeholder in discussions about the media and media freedom, I think is also a reality.
Yeah, very interesting point you raised, Sharaad, because I don't think we see that over here where the public also has got a reaction which these media companies has to be sensitive of. I think, yes, India is definitely one country. I don't know if anywhere else has this where you are concerned of what the reaction of the public to a particular article, to a particular news piece or a interview that you've been done. So that's true.
Every time I sit down with a professional to decode the mechanics of business, the goal has always been the same. We want to bring you unfiltered information, but to keep the lights on here and to keep pulling back the curtain, to keep setting up this place and having the guests that we have, I'm going to need your help. Hitting that subscribe button is not really just a metric on a screen or a graph that we look at to see how many subscribers we got. It is a leverage. See, the math is simple. The bigger this community grows, the greater doors we can open. A larger audience means we can bring greater guests to tackle bigger information, to tackle more timely and relevant information that is applicable to all of us today. A bigger audience also means complex topics where we get to ask very difficult questions as well. Now, if you found value in today's conversation, or if this show has helped you see a particular profession in a new light, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because I always say this, you will not know what blessing or what benefit you would bring to that person at that point of time. So, to my listener out there, build this platform together with me so that we can keep bringing the guests, we can keep having those conversations, and we can keep shedding light into professions, and we can keep asking those questions. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your support. Thank you for watching this video, and thank you for subscribing to this video. I will see you in my next episode on Unfiltered Business. My name is Josh. Have a good one.